Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back. Kellen here with Droid Life, and I've got my hands, well, this is obviously Samsung's new Gear S2 smartwatch. Samsung announced it and has unveiled it at IFA, and they also let us spend some time with it. So we wanted to show you guys basically our initial impressions here. So as a recap, 1.2-inch circular Super AMOLED display, 360 by 360, has a dual-core processor, 512 megabytes of RAM, 4 gig storage, runs Tizen, has a heart rate sensor monitor back here. It's IP68 dust and water resistant. NFC for mobile payments, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, all that stuff. 250 milliamp hour battery seems a little small though, but they say it could get 2 to 3 days of battery life. In terms of using the watch, it's sort of widget and app based. You can see here I'm just buzzing around looking at apps, and so to navigate, you have this bottom button down here, and if you tap that once, it opens your apps. You can actually map it though, which I just showed right there, and tap twice to open something like the gallery. And the top button up there, I'll tap every once in a while. It's kind of just your back button or your kind of get back home button. In loading apps, and again, this is heavily app-based. Samsung's partnered with a whole bunch of different companies to get their apps ready, like Twitter and CNN and ESPN and Uber and so it's kind of like the Apple Watch in that approach where the more apps, the better kind of thing. You can see this is sort of struggling in my time with it. And I think it's maybe because the phone it was paired to didn't exactly have data connection. And so I don't think any of the apps were actually working. So don't judge it based on that. Swiping in and out of things and moving around in this watch was really fast. The performance seemed really good. So again, don't take the apps there as a sign of things to come. It's got watch faces. You can swap between a whole bunch, get rid of them if you don't want them to show as options. Samsung said there's some where you can customize different pieces to them, and I apologize, but I couldn't figure out how to do that, or at least I couldn't find the specific ones where you can do that, so I just kind of jumped around between a bunch of different ones. Overall though, nice looking watch. Not necessarily as high quality, I don't think, as say the Moto 360 or the Huawei watch. It just doesn't quite feel up there. The plastic band doesn't feel as great. And yeah, you can remove these, by the way. You just sort of pinch here and pull down and they slide out. It's not super easy to do, but it's not hard either. I mean, it took me, 3 seconds? So it's kind of a nice little option. Overall, nice. Definitely want to play with it some more. Before we do that though, here is a comparison quickly of it to the Moto 360, and this is the original Moto 360, not the new one. I filmed this and spent this time with the watch well before I ever touched the new Moto 360. So you can see here it's a little bit smaller, but that's because it has smaller display, smaller battery. It doesn't feel quite as premium as the Moto 360. The Moto 360 just has that really nice stainless steel case. This one feels a little more plasticky, but it does have this cool rotating bezel, which I haven't really talked about much, but the rotating bezel is actually really, really cool. I just found, I could see myself with it on my wrist just sitting there spinning and spinning and spinning. So just something to keep in mind. It's kind of a unique way to navigate, and I actually do like it for the most part. Here's what they look like on wrists next to each other, just so you can sort of see the size difference. Moto 360 looks pretty big next to it. Not a bad design for the Gear S2 though. It's just... I guess we'll see later on. Here it is though, next to the Apple Watch. This just wouldn't be a comparison if it wasn't Samsung versus Apple, because everyone's going to do that. So here we go. We're doing it. Obviously the Apple Watch has its digital crown, which spins and helps you navigate things. And Samsung obviously went with their rotating bezel for navigating. Their UIs, they're not really all that similar. Here's a look at the back though. So heart rate sensors, and then obviously they have the hot swappable action with watch bands. So Apple kind of started this trend, and now everyone else is doing it. Huawei, Moto, and Samsung, they're all doing it. And it just makes sense, you should, but I'm sure people will argue that they copied them there. The UI though is heavily black on the Tizen based Samsung watch, and obviously the Apple Watch is. After playing with it, I didn't get the feeling that the UI on the Gear S2 is necessarily a copy or anything like that of what Apple has done. They just went with a dark theme, sort of like Apple did, but the UI doesn't necessarily look that similar. The watch choosing screen is a little bit, but how many different ways can you do a watch face choosing screen? Otherwise, the watches look completely different, and the Apple Watch does definitely feel more premium than the Gear S2, but the Gear S2 is probably not going to cost $1,000. So with that in mind, here is the white version. Forgot to show you this earlier. So white version, it looks nice. This actually looks like, the color scheme anyway, looks like the Apple Watch I have on hand. But you know, it's the same as the black one I've been showing you. Rotating bezel, it's got 2 buttons, all the same specs, the 1.2 inch Super AMOLED display, 2 to 3 day battery life. It's just got a white band. So, you know, and look, bands can be swapped, and Samsung has said they're working with other people to make more. So here is the Gear S2 Classic. So classic meaning it's supposed to look more like a classic watch. And it kind of does. It's got lugs, and this one comes with a leather band, and it still has the rotating bezel, but they've kind of added some ridges to it to kind of give it this grippy feel and to sort of look almost maybe like a fluted bezel that you might see on a more traditional watch. I actually liked the grippiness and those ridges on this one better, and something about just the dial felt a little bit more premium on this version. And so the specs on this aren't any different really than the regular Gear S2. It's just called a classic because it's supposed to look more like a traditional watch. Here it is next to the Apple Watch. You can see that, I mean, they're nothing alike now. Heart rate sensor still. It's actually, this is probably the one I prefer more than the regular Gear S2. It just, because it has that nicer sort of regular watch look to it. The regular Gear S2 just comes off a little futuristic, which I'm just not a huge fan of. But for the most part, this might be the one to consider if you're into this. Oh, and something else I haven't mentioned yet. The Gear S2 will work with any Android device. So let's actually look at the companion app here and talk more about some of this stuff. So Samsung's opening it up. If you knew in the past their Gear watches all only worked with Samsung devices and Galaxy devices, well, now they're opening these up to work with any Android device, which is kind of awesome. So you don't have to own a Samsung phone in order to own the Gear S2, which is kind of cool, or the Gear S2 Classic if you want that more classic look. But you can see in here this fully featured app. You know, you tap on it on a watch face and it changes it. It's sort of like the Android Wear app a little bit. You can manage your notifications and select which ones you want and don't want sending you things. Limiting notifications. You can manage apps in here. So all of your app pages, and look, the watches I was using have 4 pages of apps, but you can change the order of how the apps show up and which page they're on and things like that. Send media. I didn't get to play with that one. I'm assuming it just has to do with music. There's just a ton of settings in here. Samsung Gear apps, so they're going to have what appears to see, I didn't have a network connection. It appears to be an app store in the Samsung App Store. Here's some other stuff though, like double pressing I showed you earlier, you can use to launch something. So I had it previously double tapping to launch the gallery, and now I have it doing the Nike app. So anyways, this is the Gear S2, and it's coming soon, and anyone can use it that has an Android device.